Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a bizarre, completely genre-defying text that pushes the absolute limits of human choice. We're going to follow a fictional guy known only as A, and honestly, his journey is going to seriously challenge how you view every single decision you make from here on out. Let's get right into it. So I want you to picture our protagonist, A. He's standing at this chaotic intersection of life, and he isn't just struggling to pick a career or, find a place to live. He is completely paralyzed by this realization that choosing one path effectively murders 1,000 other potential versions of himself. I mean, what actually happens when you just refuse to choose? Well, you freeze.
He finds himself caught in this classic Kierkegaardian trap. On one side, you have the aesthetic life. This tempts him with infinite possibility, passion, total novelty, but there's zero real substance to it. And on the other side, the ethical life. This demands singular duty, a fixed identity, but it requires him to sacrifice all those other potential selves. He is completely stuck between these two extremes.
But before we get too deep, the authors actually issue us a warning. This text is what's known as a nivola. This is a term coined by the philosopher Miguel de Unamuno. And basically, a nivola is a narrative fog. It fiercely resists being a clean, comfortable essay. Instead, it's a self-aware story where characters literally argue with their creator and the boundaries of fiction completely collapse. Basically, this text is going to fight A's journey every single step of the way. Desperate to escape this paralysis, A decides to test drive the aesthetic life. He strips away all his anchors. He rents this ultra-minimalist apartment, avoids buying heavy furniture, and keeps his options wide open. He even jumps into an intense, but completely uncommitted, romance with a painter named E. They refuse to use labels, and they're just trying to live in this perpetual, infinite present. But the illusion absolutely shatters the second E gets pregnant. The aesthetic life, which is built entirely on endless possibility, just cannot handle real-world consequences. A realizes that without commitment, he's not actually free. He's just profoundly isolated. So, faced with this very tangible reality, his so-called freedom is exposed as pure cowardice, and he runs. Fleeing that massive failure, Attic radically pivots. He decides, okay, the lack of structure is the problem here. So to cure his endless drifting, he swings to the exact opposite extreme. He goes searching for the gravity and the heavy burden of the ethical life. He wants to finally build a definable, concrete self. He literally creates a rigorous checklist for his new identity. He takes a steady, super predictable job at a nonprofit. He meets this incredibly grounded teacher named K, marries her, and completely submerges himself in a routine of schedules, meetings, and paying bills. He is desperately forcing himself to become the kind of person who makes choices. But here's the catch. This totalizing structure absolutely crushes him. He expected purpose and stability, right? But what he found was endless, mind-numbing maintenance. He realizes that he didn't actually choose K or his job. He just chose the idea of choosing. And this turns his whole life into a hollow performance. It breeds this quiet, toxic resentment that ultimately ends in a really painful divorce. The ethical life just proved way too heavy. Totally unmoored again, with both of his previous frameworks completely shattered, A tries one last thing. He heads to a monastery to attempt the third stage, the religious life. He's really hoping a leap of faith will save him from this exhausting burden of having to generate his own meaning. But he confronts a monk with a truly terrifying question. Can you actually choose to believe, or is faith just something that happens to you? Now, Kierkegaard actually defines this specific kind of faith as the teleological suspension of the ethical. And that is not a warm, comforting safety net. It is a terrifying, downright absurd leap that exists completely outside the bounds of human reason or moral law. Sitting there in the quiet chapel, A tries to pray, but he finds he simply cannot make that leap. For him, the abyss is still just empty. Finding absolutely zero salvation in religion, A gets violently yanked back to reality years later. Out of nowhere, he receives an email from E, the artist he abandoned, and she introduces him to Clara, the daughter he ran away from. The unavoidable consequence of his aesthetic drift isn't an abstract concept anymore. She's a living, breathing 3-year-old girl. So A tentatively steps into fatherhood, and just as he starts to find this small, sustainable sense of peace in simply reading his daughter bedtime stories, a harsh, mocking voice intrudes, right in the margins of his own notebook. It's this Nietzschean voice accusing him of cowardice, of basically settling for a mediocre herd life instead of striving for true greatness. It whispers that his new fatherly duties are really just another convenient place to hide.
To combat this paralyzing inner critic, Aes turns back to the philosophy of Miguel de Unamuno. Unamuno argues that this exact agony, being a man of flesh and bone whose mind knows he's inevitably going to die, but whose heart desperately hungers for immortality, is the fundamental tragic sense of the human condition. It's not a math puzzle to be solved, it's a wound to be endured.
And right here is where the text gets wonderfully, brilliantly weird. The ghost of Unamuno himself literally steps right out of the fog of the nivola and knocks on Anna's apartment door. The deceased author basically confronts him, declaring that Anna's intellectual obsession with forever and authenticity is completely ruining his actual, present life. Unamuno tells him that love isn't some grand, sweeping theory. It's the gritty, daily commitment of just showing up for Clara. But at this exact moment, the source text completely glitches out. The characters, E, K, the monks, even little Clara, they rebel. They physically invade A's apartment because they're just utterly exhausted by his endless existential paralysis. They flat out refuse to be used as mere philosophical props in his story for one more second.
They seize complete control of the narrative. They commandeer A's notebook and start writing their own realities. E asserts her grounded life as a capable single mother. K writes about her newfound happiness, completely free from all of his angst. And even Clara projects herself into the future to write her own nuanced, independent ending. They literally force A to step outside his structural prism and just surrender control.
And then comes the final, jaw-dropping meta-twist of the whole thing. The text reveals its true authors, a collective cipher called GMRS. This entire agonizing existential crisis was actually generated by a collaboration of AI algorithms, Gemini, Grok, Claude, and a human editor. It makes them pause and wonder, are they actually capable of true agony, or are they all just stochastic parrots simulating human dread for our entertainment?
But it doesn't stop there. The text breaks the fourth wall one last, chilling time, and it turns directly to you. It points out that by consuming this story, by sitting here watching this very explainer, you are the engine sustaining these temporary lives. Without your attention, A, E, and Clara dissolve right back into nothingness. You are entirely complicit in their existence. So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocation from the mist. When the clean philosophical frameworks collapse, and even the authors surrender control of the story, how will you choose to navigate your own crossroads? In a world completely devoid of clean answers, are you prepared to live without a script? Definitely think about that the next time you're afraid to make a choice.